Welcome to How I Built My Fundraising Consultancy, the stories behind the people driving results in the nonprofit sector.
Sitting on some of these boards, you get to realize, wow, sometimes I'm the problem. I'm not the solution. Right now, I sit on the board of the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless, and I've sat on several other boards in the past. What I've found is that one of the biggest challenges we have in our sector is a misunderstanding of what a board's supposed to do, both from the side of the nonprofit organization, but also from the side of the board, in that, it's not the board's role to dictate the day-to-day working of the organization. The role of a board is to set policy, set strategic direction, and then make sure that the team in place, the paid staff, have the resources they need to execute and also to support fundraising.
I'm here today with Andrew Olsen, author of Rainmaking, currently at Newport One, former consultant at large. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, Tim. Good morning. How are you?
Doing good. We've spoken before. We did a podcast with Greg for engagement fundraising, so if you haven't had a chance, listen to that. But I wanted to have you on this podcast to kind of talk about your history as a consultant and building that business and now working for Newport One. To begin, can you kind of get into your background a little bit in fundraising and how did you get into it?
Like so many of us, I'm old enough and been in this industry now that when I started, there was no university program for nonprofit management. There was no fundraising bachelor's degree or anything like that, like there are today. So I stumbled into the industry like a lot of other people. After graduating from college, I worked at one of the most successful commercial real estate firms in the country out of their Los Angeles office and completely hated it. It was through some relationships that my father-in-law had with a gentleman who turned out to be a guy named Mark Reed. And for those in our industry, they'll know likely that Mark is the son of Russ Reed, who's the founder of one of the largest and most successful nonprofit marketing agencies ever to exist in our industry.
Gotcha. And was there a certain cause or motivation for you to get into it?
At the time, the motivation was I don't want to be unemployed, quite honestly.
That is a powerful motivation, I must say.
It is absolutely a powerful motivator.
And has that shifted over the years?
I have come to understand over 18 years now, that there's, many other reasons why I chose to be in this business and really to stay in this business for so long. One of them, I think I mentioned in the other podcast that we recorded recently, that, I feel like I'm on a personal mission to, in some small way, to end as much suffering as I can in this world. And a lot of that comes from my own experience. When I was a teen, because of some issues within my family, we ended up losing our home, losing everything we owned, and for a time sleeping in really nasty pay-by-day motels and living on people's floors and just experiencing, certainly not what it's like to be chronically homeless, but experiencing a type of poverty and homelessness that really have made me question and think about what it is I want to do in this world. And so I draw on that quite a bit as motivation to not just stay in this industry, but really to work my butt off for the organizations that I consult with and advise to make sure that they're delivering on their mission as much as possible.
And can you walk me through your prior life as a individual consultant?
I started again my career in the fundraising business at Russ Reed, and I was there for about 5 or 6 years. Left and went to another firm. I actually moved my family from Los Angeles out to Minneapolis, where we live now, and went to work for a teleservices firm. After a few years there, I ended up going client side and went to work for an organization called Gillette Children's Specialty Healthcare. It's a hospital here in the Twin Cities that cares for kids with chronic disabilities and traumatic brain injuries. And while I was there, I just kind of got the itch. I was running their annual fund program and building out all sorts of new stuff for them, new channels, targeting new audiences, all that kind of stuff. Didn't feel like I was using my brain as much as I could. So I started consulting on the side just as a way to stay sharp and continue to build a network and have fun. So from about 2008 to 2010-ish, let's say, I started taking on individual clients. So I started doing copywriting for some nonprofits and then started doing strategy and planning, primarily in the direct response space for some organizations. And I kept that going off and on until just a few years ago. So I left Gillette around 2010, and I went back to work for Russ Reed to build their children's hospital practice, and then later to run their food banks and rescue missions and Salvation Army businesses. But all throughout that time, I had additional contracts where I was doing other kinds of work. So, for example, Russ Reed is a direct response agency. They don't do anything in the major gift space, but you referenced the book that I wrote, Rainmaking, the Fundraiser's Guide to Landing Big Gifts. So I wrote that in 2013 with a guy named Roy Jones, and Roy is one of the most prolific major gift fundraisers in our industry. In fact, at some point, you guys got to talk to him. He's over at Mercy Ships, and he and I wrote that book basically to help struggling major gift officers be more effective. And after writing that, the consulting gigs really opened up, where there were, small organizations primarily asking me to come in and, write them a development strategy, help coach them through how to do major gifts and things like that. So for, since then, I've been doing a lot of work like that. Now, I transitioned to Newport One back in July of 2017. After leaving Russ Reed, and the business model at Newport One is pretty unique. We're primarily a direct response agency, but because each of the senior folks at Newport kind of manages their own portfolio and delivers the kind of value and services that their individual clients need, there's a lot more freedom. So I've actually rolled up all of my consulting. I no longer have outside contracts. I've rolled all of that under the umbrella of Newport One, just because of the flexibility of their business model.
Does Newport One, you speak of this flexibility, are you working with those same clients on a one-to-one basis, or are you in any capacity anymore? Or what's the process been like for those clients?
Yeah, so that's one of the really interesting things, and it's actually what drew me to Newport. If any of your listeners who've been in a traditional direct response fundraising agency or have worked with one, maybe on the client side, they'll know that the way those organizations are structured, there's a senior level group of people, and they set the strategy, and they often are the salespeople. But then once a nonprofit says, yes, we're going to hire you to do this, oftentimes the work gets handed off to less expensive junior level staff to get it done, because that helps the agency prop up their margin and keep their profitability high. Newport's model is very different from that. We're a smaller agency, so instead of 200 or 300 staff members, we've got, around 20. And we keep ourselves intentionally small so that we maintain a lower overhead for the nonprofits that we serve. And also because the value proposition we give to our clients is that every organization will benefit from a senior level fundraiser. So to give you an example, in my business, I am on just about every phone call with my clients. I'm involved in every aspect of my client's business. Okay.
Now, you mentioned the book being a spur to new business. Is it the topic you wrote about in particular, or is it just having a book out there that makes you more accessible to potential business?
Yeah, I think it's probably both. So this was something that we had not planned for. To give you kind of set the stage for it, Roy Jones and I were at a development conference for a large group of social service organizations back in 2012. We were in Washington, D.C. We were sitting at the bar at the Capitol Hilton after the sessions had concluded for the day. And behind us, we could hear a group of 15 to 20 development officers just, kind of commiserating and complaining that they were having such a hard time finding major donors for their organizations. We'd advised many of these organizations. We've been under the hood and looked at their donor files. And so we knew that each of those organizations had 10, 15, up to 40,000 donors on their donor file, and that there was absolutely pockets of wealth, capacity, and interest on those files. But these folks were so focused on the idea of having to go find major donors outside the organization, outside the current supporter base. And so as he and I sat there, we just, we literally scratched out on a notepad, or a napkin rather, what it would look like to build a training curriculum and a sort of a teaching book that was really actionable and would let a development officer, read it in a day or two and then begin to implement 48 hours later, let's say. So that, for us, we figured we'd sell some books, but really that the impact would be that the industry would have a resource so that junior level people or people who've never done individual relationship building fundraising work could grab that and have a roadmap to go execute it. I didn't stop and say, wow, this is going to lead to so much more business for us. We just kind of did it, and we had, fun doing it, and we're excited to get it out in the market. It's never going to be on Oprah's bestseller list. It's not one of those kind of books, niche within a niche. But we've sold, hundreds of copies, let's say. But what has shocked me is that having that book has created, I think, instant credibility for myself and for Roy on the topic and in the sector, has really elevated name awareness for us, and also has resulted in a lot of people reaching out and saying, hey, read your book. It makes total sense. I'm still not completely comfortable doing this. Do you offer coaching? Or do you consult? Between that and then also using that book as a lead generation tool to get in with other organizations and really kind of start a dialogue about how we can help them in other ways. I would say conservatively, between myself and Roy, we've probably sold $1.4 to $1.8 million in consulting because of that book.
Wow. That's impressive. Yeah. Looking over your history, and I noticed you have been on a few different nonprofit boards over the years. Has that impacted how you approach fundraising? And does it give you any more empathy towards the nonprofits?
It has impacted me. Being a consultant to nonprofits and being able to, for lack of a better term, airdrop in, see something, create a solution, and then walk away. It makes it really easy for people like me and others of us in the space to get kind of cavalier in the way that we talk about the challenges faced by nonprofits and oftentimes the things that they do wrong, things of that nature. Sitting on some of these boards, you get to realize, wow, sometimes I'm the problem. I'm not the solution. Right now, I sit on the board of the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless, and I've sat on several other boards in the past. What I've found is that one of the biggest challenges we have in our sector is a misunderstanding of what a board's supposed to do, both from the side of the nonprofit organization, but also from the side of the board, in that, it's not the board's role to dictate the day-to-day working of the organization. The role of a board is to set policy, set strategic direction, and then make sure that the team in place, the paid staff, have the resources they need to execute, and also to support fundraising.
And how receptive are most boards to hearing what they're supposed to be doing?
Honestly, I think most boards are very receptive. I think one of the biggest places we fall down is not really clearly articulating what those expectations are. A saying in sort of the change management space, which is, once you've said something enough that you're tired of it, you've probably just scratched the surface for everybody else in the room to understand, and you have to keep saying it. And so I think, oftentimes with boards, when you bring a new board member on, they might go through a couple hours of training, and then maybe once a quarter you do a 10-minute refresher at the start of the board meeting. That's just not nearly enough time and enough repetition of saying to these folks, hey, here's the 3 things we need you to focus on, and here's the 2 action steps you can take. And from my point of view, I think that's something that needs to be reinforced probably on a monthly basis with board members, because it's rare. You do find board members who, they have a whole different agenda and they're there for a different reason and not really in alignment with the organization. But I would say the vast majority of board members are well-meaning, well-intentioned people who want to do a good job, just have no clue what the expectations are. Or if they do know the expectations, they don't actually know how to get from point A to point B because they've never had the training. They're not experts in the field like we are. It's less about willingness, and it's probably much more about comfort level and having a roadmap, if you will, to do what they actually need to do well.
Okay. Now, back when you were running your own consultancy, and even today, I guess, with Newport One, getting a new client started, do you have an exploratory meeting to see what you should be working with them on, or is the Rainmaking book kind of the framework for getting clients started? What's your process?
It really depends on what the client needs. My preference is to always start with some sort of exploratory conversation. I think it's a bad thing to go straight into pitching business or proposal mode. So much of our business and our industry is about relationship. So I prefer, and the style that I take is to try to build that relationship up front, understand what's going on in an organization. Oftentimes someone will say, I need this. And after 20 or 30 minutes of discussion, we realize, well, we started the conversation saying you needed X, but you really need these other things instead. Or, yes, that's important, and you need 5 other things as well. So I like to conduct discovery conversations, and sometimes that's 1 conversation, sometimes it's 5. It just really depends on the complexity of the situation. Rainmaking and that book helps people self-identify. So there are some contracts that I get where, someone will call me and, like I said earlier, literally say, I read your book. I want you to coach me on that. In fact, I have a call in a couple hours with a client who came to me exactly in that way. But then I have other organizations that I consult with where we're running a direct mail program or running their digital strategy, those sort of things. Because in our discovery conversations and looking at their data, we were able to identify that, there are a number of different needs and opportunities based on the organization's growth goals and budget parameters and things like that. So we bring a whole different suite of solutions for them.
Okay. And back when you're running your consultancy, did you narrow down a list of, I guess, like a product menu of things you'd offer clients for them to at least identify themselves with, hey, I could use that 1 service out of the 7 you offered to kind of simplify things for them?
I think it's a bad thing in our sector when you try to be all things to all people. There are certain areas where you need really deep expertise, and if you don't have it, you'll probably do a disservice to your client. I don't offer sort of generalist services, but the areas where focus are direct response fundraising, so that's digital, direct mail, teleservices, things that I've been doing for 18 years. And then on the coaching and consulting side, annual fund consulting and coaching, major gift consulting and coaching. And quite honestly, over the last couple of years, I've done a lot of change management consulting. I wouldn't call myself an expert in that. I led a really sizable change management process at Russ Reed over the last few years. And so gleaning insights from that, I've been able to help a number of clients in that space as well. But there are, dozens of other things that organizations might ask for that, the best answer I can give them is to refer them to somebody else who's a more of an expert in that space.
Okay. And when you were running your own business, what was, I guess, your biggest mistake you made, and what lessons did you learn from that?
I would say early on, I took on business because I just thought I needed to land clients. And so I probably took on some projects that I wasn't as well qualified for as others would have been, or where the relationship wasn't as good of a fit as it should have been. So what I learned from that is it's important to be hungry and hustle, but don't take any piece of business just because it's in front of you. The other issue that I have struggled with for a long time is how do we price our services in the nonprofit sector? For so long, and even today, there are conversations about, overhead percentages and cost of fundraising, all those sorts of things. And so I think, oftentimes, at least for myself, there are projects that I approach where I might price them one way. And then, I have a colleague who works on my team who will often challenge me and say, is this the appropriate pricing? And will you be able to do your best work at these rates, knowing what you know about everything else that we're working on? And, will this client be a priority? And will you be able to focus and not be concerned about profitability or anything like that if you price this too low? I'm not suggesting that we should gouge clients or have exorbitant rates or anything like that. But I think, one caution I would give to folks is being the discount retailer in a service business makes it really tough to be successful.
You do have limited time to work within as well.
It's not like a manufacturing business where we just, turn the dial on the presses and all of a sudden we kick out 40% more of something. We have a finite amount of time, and you've got to price your services and your value in a way that you can maximize your revenue and profit. And again, not in a gouging sort of way, but in a way that delivers enough value both for your client and for you.
And what was your business model back when you were running your own business?
Pricing model was based on really kind of an hours approach. And coming out of a big direct response agency like Russ Reed, their business model for a long time was based on a cost per piece of mail put in the mail stream. Today, I really try to focus, and it's a bit of an evolving art, if you will, but on the idea of value-based pricing. So it's not strictly based on the number of hours that it takes to get a project done, but it's based in part on that, but also in part on what is the relative value that we're providing to the organization. How is access to us maximizing that value, and therefore that project or that program has a different level of cost and worth based on that value proposition.
Okay. Yeah, because I've heard it's not the most ethical thing to get like a percentage of what you end up raising for them, but if that's a different approach. It's like we're providing this amount of value, whether it's successful or not at that point, right?
Right. To your point, the AFP Code of Ethics is very clear that percentage-based fundraising is a violation of their code. I don't price that way, and I would tell organizations to walk away from any consultant that does. It creates several levels of conflict, both with donors and with the organization. But, to go into an organization and say, this is the price for this defined scope of work, and really to outline for them first, what's the scope of value? And what I mean by that is to say, okay, if we're successful together in this endeavor, here are the things that you're going to experience as an outcome. So if you're going to raise X number of dollars, which means that you're going to be able to deliver on your mission in these different ways, these end recipients are going to benefit from this. So really outlining what the future desired reality is, and then tying that back to a scope of work. So in order to achieve all those things, we need to do these 12 specific activities, and the price for that activity, in total is X.
Now, when you were on your own, did you hire out any virtual assistants or Upwork people or, people to help out in any way?
I think I just wasn't smart enough to know that was even an option. I kind of just thought, okay, I got to do this on my own. I certainly had like graphic designers that I would contract with and things like that. But I didn't even know that resources like that were available until very recently. And I'll tell you, even at Newport One, because of the difference in our business model, we don't have 100 people in our agency that do those sort of things. I actually have been recently using some of those services, like Fiverr even, to build prospect lists and things like that to enable us to go further faster and do it at a very low cost.
Now, before we get to the lightning round, I just want to ask, do you have any piece of advice for those getting started? What do you recommend for them?
If you're just starting and your goal is to be a full-time consultant, I would focus a lot more time on having meaningful sales conversations with people and a lot less time on large group networking. Those can often make us feel like we're being productive, but I'll give you an example. I was at a nonprofit conference yesterday, and it felt really productive because I talked to a lot of people, but I probably only met one person who is a viable potential client. The key to success in any business like this is sales. Yes, you have to deliver, but you can't deliver if you haven't sold anything. As you're starting out, I would spend way more time focusing on reaching out in a one-to-one way to connect with nonprofits, to have conversations, to have those exploratory discussions, and to build a sales funnel, rather than going to the local AFP mixers and the nonprofit coalition meetings and those kind of things. So those are fine to do occasionally, but they waste a lot of time that make you feel like you're being productive when you're not really. Activity and progress are not the same thing.
When we return, a quick lightning round. First, a quick break. Today's free resource offer is the ultimate guide to writing major donor letters. You can download this at imarketsmart.com/major letters. That's www.imarketsmart.com/major letters. Here's what you'll learn. The 4 types of letters you should be sending your major donors, what you need to know before you begin writing, how to design your letter to be scanned before it's read, how to craft a compelling call to action, how to adopt a you mindset and make the donor feel like a hero, and much more. Visit imarketsmart.com/major letters to download your copy. That's imarketsmart.com/major letters.
With that, let's get to the lightning round. This is a series of quick questions and answers.
Okay.
What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Do what's right for the client.
What piece of advice would you have for yourself as a 25-year-old?
Don't be so arrogant.
What book would you recommend to those getting started, and why? Outside of your own, of course.
There's a gentleman named Todd Duncan who's a sales consultant, and he has written extensively on relationship-based selling. Anything he's written, I would recommend.
What's your favorite personal productivity habit?
I get up really early in the morning, and I know that I do my best work between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. So I hit it hard at that time.
Do you have a favorite monthly subscription or service you're signed up for?
There's a couple. From an educational perspective, I just signed up for Oren Claff. So he wrote a book called Pitch Anything. And he has a monthly subscription service that teaches you how to do better cold sales emails, better prospect presentations, all sorts of stuff like that. My business operates today on Basecamp. So that is another subscription-based model that I find to be highly effective for project management. And full disclosure, you guys did not pay me to say this, but I have had a lot of success with the monthly subscription to the Fundraiser report card. That has helped me pitch a handful of clients recently, and it's been really successful.
What's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
I kickbox. Some people know that, most don't, but it's how I keep my mind clear and keep from being a couch potato.
Desk or car, what would you clean first?
Dude, I have 3 little kids. I'm not going near the car. I'll clean my desk.
Too many spilled juice boxes.
Pretty much, yep.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee. All day.
And what do clients never ask you that you wish they did?
They never ask how much revenue is this going to generate. They only ask how much is this going to cost.
What is the most common error you see nonprofits make?
So, did you put that in there on purpose?
I always ask this one. It's a good one.
Okay. The reason I ask is because in January of next year, I'm coming out with a book called 101 Biggest Mistakes Nonprofits Make and How to Avoid Them. So this is a perfect tee up there.
So you have 101 answers to this question.
I do, but I'm not going to give you 100. I think the biggest mistake that I see nonprofits make is hiring the wrong talent. Hiring people because they believe that they will be cheap labor, or because they think, especially in the major gift space, because they think that they're, gregarious and bubbly and they can talk to anybody. And on those two topics, you get what you pay for. And just because somebody is bubbly does not mean that they can be a strategic gift officer. It goes way beyond that from a talent and staffing perspective. But I believe that talent acquisition and talent management is probably the biggest mistake that nonprofits make.
What are the best nonprofits doing right outside of hiring great people?
I think the best nonprofits are actively engaging in robust strategic planning, and they are intentionally carrying that out over time. I think that's one of the big differentiators.
Mm-hmm. What charities and nonprofits do you admire or support?
I told you earlier, I'm on the board of the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless. They get most of my time, and they get a good amount of my charitable gift support. I also love the rescue mission world. So there's, 250 rescue missions in the U.S. and Canada, and I've worked with most of them in my career. Those are my people. In addition to that, I am personally very passionate about Parkinson's. I have a good friend who was diagnosed early on. He and I worked together at Russ Reed for almost 20 years. So I'm very supportive of the Parkinson's Institute and Clinical Center.
And where can people find more information about your services and your books?
Corporately, they can find me at newportone.com. You can also find me at andrewolsen.net. That is my blog. There's information there about rainmaking. They can, sign up to get my blog on a regular basis. And I also just recently have launched what I think is going to be a really successful weekly nonprofit leadership email series. So there's information there as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Andrew.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of How I Built My Fundraising Consultancy, presented by MarketSmart. If you like the show, make sure to review it in iTunes and pass it along to a colleague. If you are curious about what we do, check out imarketsmart.com, and don't forget to download the ultimate guide to writing major donor letters by going to www.imarketsmart.com/major letters. Thanks for listening.